They thought humans were weak. They thought we were just another primitive species begging for scraps at the Galactic table. The Galactic Council had seen 1,000 civilizations rise and fall, each one following the same predictable pattern of submission and compliance. But humans? We don't follow patterns. We break them. When Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped onto that pristine council chamber floor, she carried more than just Earth's hopes. She carried the fury of a species that had clawed its way from caves to stars, that had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that would have broken lesser beings. The council thought they were making an example when they executed her in front of the entire galaxy. They thought they were sending a message about the price of defiance. They were right about the message. They were dead wrong about who would receive it. What follows is not a story of conquest or glory. It's the account of what happens when you mistake human restraint for weakness, when you confuse our desire for peace with inability to wage war. It's the record of the day the galaxy learned why Earth had spent centuries preparing for threats that didn't exist yet. Because when humans say never again, we mean it with the force of fusion reactors and the precision of quantum computers. And when we make a promise to the dead, we keep it with the efficiency that built our civilization and the fury that preserved it. The Galactic Council wanted to teach humanity its place in the universe. They succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. The crystal halls of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly upward, their surfaces reflecting the bioluminescent glow of 100 different species. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked steadily across the polished floor, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor surrounding her. Behind her, the heavy doors sealed shut with a sound like thunder. She was alone now, as Earth's representatives always were in this chamber. The council demanded isolation for their formal proceedings, claiming it prevented outside interference. Sarah knew better. They wanted to intimidate their subjects, to make them feel small and powerless beneath the weight of galactic authority. The chamber itself was designed for that purpose. Massive columns supported a dome that disappeared into darkness above, while holographic displays showed the positions of 10,000 worlds under council jurisdiction. Each point of light represented billions of lives, all bound by the same treaties that Earth had signed 20 years ago in desperation. Ambassador Chen. The voice resonated from everywhere at once, spoken in perfect English by the council's translation matrix. You stand before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council to answer for your species violations of Treaty Section 47, subsection 12. Sarah looked up at the semicircular arrangement of seats that rose in tiers around her. Representatives of 53 different species sat in judgment, their forms ranging from the crystalline Zephyr to the gas cloud entities of the Vorth Collective. At the center, elevated above all others, sat High Arbiter Velcros of the Hegemony. The Hegemony had founded the Council 3,000 years ago, establishing themselves as the dominant force in this galaxy. Their representatives were humanoid in general shape, but twice the height of an average human, with skin that shifted between silver and gold depending on their emotional state. Velcros' hide currently showed the deep copper of contempt. I stand ready to address the Council's concerns, Sarah replied, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. She had practiced this moment for months, knowing that every word would be transmitted across the galaxy. Earth's population of 12 billion was watching, along with countless others throughout Council space. Concerns? Velcros' laugh was like breaking glass. Ambassador, your species has violated direct orders regarding military development. Our monitoring stations detected energy signatures consistent with forbidden weapons research in your soul system. Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but kept her expression neutral. This was the moment they had all known was coming. High Arbiter, Earth has complied with all treaty obligations regarding weapons limitations. Our military forces remain within prescribed parameters. Do not insult our intelligence, human. The speaker was Counselor Thran of the Korth Empire, his segmented carapace clicking as he leaned forward. We have evidence of massive energy expenditures in your asteroid belt, construction projects that serve no civilian purpose. The evidence they referenced was real enough. For the past 5 years, Earth had been building something in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The project consumed more energy than most planets used in a decade, and its purpose was officially classified as deep space research infrastructure. The truth was far different. Hidden within those asteroids, protected by layers of camouflage and deception, lay the culmination of human engineering, the Prometheus Array. It was Earth's insurance policy, a weapon system designed not for conquest, but for survival. Humanity had learned from history that peace treaties only lasted as long as the signers found them convenient. Our asteroid mining operations are well documented, Sarah continued. All construction serves legitimate commercial and scientific purposes. The Council is welcome to review our public records. We have reviewed your records, Velcros said, his skin shifting to the angry red of accusation. They are incomplete and deliberately misleading. The energy signatures we detected indicate weapons capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The chamber fell silent. Around the gallery, alien representatives shifted in their seats. Some showed obvious fear, others calculation. A few displayed what might have been hunger. Sarah realized that this accusation was not unexpected news to most of the Council. They had come here with a predetermined outcome in mind. High Arbiter, she said carefully. Earth signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty in good faith. We have submitted to regular inspections and provided detailed reports on all military activities. If the Council has specific concerns about our compliance, we request formal review proceedings as outlined in section. Silence. Velcros rose from his seat, his massive form casting a shadow across the chamber floor. The Council has voted. By unanimous decision, we find Earth guilty of treaty violations and weapons proliferation. The prescribed penalty is immediate intervention and administrative oversight of your military forces. Sarah's blood went cold. Administrative oversight was a polite term for occupation. It meant Council fleets in Earth's skies, alien troops on human soil, and the slow dissolution of everything her species had built. Worse, it meant that Earth's actual defensive preparations would be discovered and dismantled. We request appeal proceedings, she said quickly. Under Article 12 of the There Will Be No Appeal. Velcros' skin had shifted to the black of finality. However, The Council recognizes that your species may require an example to understand the gravity of the situation. The floor beneath Sarah's feet began to glow with an inner light. She looked down to see geometric patterns emerging in the crystal, forming a perfect circle around her position. The light grew brighter, and she felt a tingling sensation across her skin that suggested some form of energy field activation. "What is this?" she demanded, though part of her already knew. "A demonstration," Velcros replied. "For too long, primitive species have tested the Council's patience with defiance and deception. Your species exemplifies this behavior. You signed our treaties under duress, agreed to our terms with reluctance, and now violate those agreements with impunity." The energy field was getting stronger. Sarah could feel her hair standing on end, could see sparks dancing across her uniform's fabric. Around the chamber, alien representatives watched with varying degrees of interest or disgust. None showed sympathy. "The Council hereby sentences Earth's representative to execution for crimes against galactic peace," Velcros announced. "Let this serve as notice to your species and all others who would challenge our authority." Sarah Chun had known this was a possibility. Earth's intelligence services had identified 3 previous cases where Council envoys had simply disappeared during negotiations. The official records always claimed they had died in accidents or from sudden illnesses, but the pattern was too convenient to be coincidental. What surprised her was not the death sentence, but her own reaction to it. Instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of relief. For 20 years, humanity had lived under the Council's thumb, forced to accept limitations on their technology, their expansion, their very sovereignty. Earth's leaders had played the game of galactic politics, hoping that compliance would eventually earn them respect and equality. They had been naive. The Council didn't want partners, it wanted subjects. And now, with this act, they had revealed their true nature to not just humanity, but to the entire galaxy. Every species watching would see that compliance was no protection against Council tyranny. "Do you have any final words, human?" Velcros asked, his tone suggesting boredom. Sarah looked up at the assembled representatives, thinking of the billions of people who were watching this moment through quantum transmissions. She thought of her daughter back on Earth, now 15, and dreaming of becoming an engineer. She thought of humanity's history, of all the times her species had faced extinction and somehow found a way to survive. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "I want every being in this galaxy to know that you could have had our friendship." Humanity came to the Council seeking partnership, trade, and mutual defense against the darkness between stars. We offered our knowledge, our dedication, and our loyalty. The energy field was crackling now, visible currents of force swirling around her body. She could feel it beginning to interfere with her biological functions, but she pressed on. "Instead, you chose fear. You saw our potential, and decided to crush it rather than nurture it. You confused our restraint for weakness, our desire for peace as inability to wage war." She paused, meeting Velcros' eyes directly. "That was your mistake." "Enough," Velcros snarled, his skin pulsing between red and black. "Activate the execution field." The energy suddenly intensified, and Sarah felt her nervous system beginning to shut down. But she managed one last statement, her voice somehow carrying clearly despite the interference. "Earth remembers its children, Velcros, and humans never forgive those who harm our family." The field reached critical intensity, and Ambassador Sarah Chun died as she had lived, with dignity, courage, and absolute commitment to her species' survival. Her body crumpled to the crystal floor as the energy field dissipated, leaving only silence in the vast chamber. Velcros looked down at the human's corpse with satisfaction. Around him, the other council members began to murmur among themselves, discussing the logistics of the coming intervention. Fleet assignments would need to be made, occupation protocols established, resistance centers identified and neutralized. "Broadcasting Council Resolution 7743 to all member worlds," announced the communication officer. "Intervention forces are to be prepared for immediate deployment to the Sol system." None of them noticed the small device that fell from Sarah's uniform as her body collapsed. It was no larger than a coin, designed to look like a simple personal communicator. In reality, it was something far different, a quantum transmitter linked directly to Earth's deepest military networks. The device had been recording everything since Sarah entered the chamber. Every word, every gesture, every moment of the execution had been transmitted in real time to command centers hidden beneath Earth's surface. Humanity's leaders had watched their ambassador die, had seen the true face of their supposed protectors. 3 minutes after Sarah Chen's heart stopped beating, the device sent a final transmission to Earth, a simple numerical code that had been programmed 20 years earlier, when humanity first signed the Council treaties. The code was 2 words in an ancient Earth language that predated space travel. Spartacus Protocol. On Earth, in a command bunker buried beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Marcus Torres received that transmission and felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. He had helped design the Spartacus Protocol during the dark early years after first contact, when it became clear that the galaxy was not the friendly place humanity had hoped to find. The protocol was simple in concept. If the Council ever crossed certain lines, if they ever demonstrated that coexistence was impossible, humanity would respond with everything they had built in secret. The Prometheus Array was just the beginning. Hidden across the Sol system were weapons and defenses that represented the absolute pinnacle of human engineering, powered by technologies that the Council couldn't even imagine. Torres looked around the command center at the faces of Earth's military leadership. Men and women from every nation, every background, united by the terrible knowledge of what was about to begin. They had hoped this day would never come. They had prepared for it anyway. "Confirm activation of Spartacus Protocol," he said quietly. Spartacus Protocol confirmed. Came the response from a dozen stations around the room. "Begin Phase 1 operations. Target acquisition and tracking for all Council assets within 50 light-years of Sol." Throughout the chamber, holographic displays came to life showing the positions of Council fleets, orbital stations, and command vessels. Each target had been cataloged and studied for years, their weaknesses identified and exploitation methods developed. "Phase 1 complete," reported the tactical officer. "All primary targets locked and ready for engagement." Send the message, Torres ordered. Across the galaxy, on every world and station and ship connected to the Council's communication network, the same transmission began broadcasting simultaneously. It was a simple message, spoken in perfect galactic standard by a human voice calm, with absolute conviction. This is Earth Command to all Council forces. You have executed our ambassador in violation of all civilized law. You have declared war on humanity without cause or provocation. We offered you peace. You chose war. Very well. You will have war unlike any your species have ever imagined. Beginning in 72 hours, all Council assets will be considered legitimate military targets. Withdraw from soul space immediately or face total annihilation. This is your only warning. Earth remembers Sarah Chun. Earth keeps faith with its children. Earth stands ready. The message repeated in the languages of every Council species, broadcast on every frequency, transmitted through every communication relay in known space. Within minutes, it would reach the farthest corners of the galaxy, carrying with it the promise of humanity's response. In the Council chamber, Velcro stared at his communication console in confusion as emergency alerts began flooding in from every corner of Council space. Reports of unknown energy signatures, massive installations suddenly appearing on sensors, fleets moving into position around human colonies that weren't supposed to have military forces. What is this? He demanded of his intelligence officers. The answer came from his senior analyst, a Zeth Kree whose crystalline form had gone completely transparent with shock. High Arbiter, we're receiving reports of human military assets throughout Council space. Installations that weren't there yesterday are now operational and targeting our forces. Impossible. Their technology couldn't. Sir, the analyst interrupted, something unheard of in Council protocol. Our monitoring stations are reporting energy signatures consistent with stellar-level destructive capability. Whatever the humans have built, it's beyond anything in our current arsenal. Velcro's felt his skin shifting through a rapid spectrum of colors as his emotional control wavered. This was supposed to be a simple demonstration of power, a quick execution followed by an easy occupation of a primitive world. Instead, he was looking at tactical displays that showed human forces appearing throughout the galaxy like a plague of locusts. How long? He asked quietly. How long for what? High Arbiter. How long do we have? The analyst's form flickered with patterns of calculation. Based on the energy signatures we're detecting and the positioning of their assets, 71 hours, 53 minutes until their stated deadline. Velcro's looked down at Sarah Chen's body, still lying on the crystal floor where she had fallen. Her final words echoed in his memory. Earth remembers its children. For the first time in 3,000 years of Council dominance, the High Arbiter of the Galactic Council felt afraid. And, in the depths of space, hidden among asteroids and gas clouds and the dark matter between stars, humanity's true fleet began to move. Captain Elena Vasquez had been waiting in the asteroid field for 3 years. Her ship, designated as a mining vessel in all official records, was actually the command center for humanity's most carefully guarded secret. The UES Retribution was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, its true nature concealed by layers of industrial camouflage and quantum stealth technology. From the outside, it looked like a standard mining operation. Robotic extractors moved across the asteroid's surface, harvesting precious metals and rare elements just as they were supposed to. Energy signatures matched those of similar facilities throughout human space. Even the crew quarters and life support systems appeared regulation standard. The deception ran deeper than visual camouflage. Every piece of equipment on the asteroid broadcast false telemetry. Every communication followed predetermined patterns. Every aspect of the operation had been designed to bore Council monitors into ignoring it entirely. For 3 years, Vasquez and her crew of 200 had lived this lie, playing the role of civilian miners while maintaining readiness for the war they hoped would never come. The quantum communication array chirped softly, indicating an incoming priority transmission from Earth Command. Vasquez felt her stomach tighten as she recognized the signal pattern. She had hoped never to see those particular frequencies active. Spartacus protocol confirmed. Came the voice from Earth, crackling slightly through the quantum static. All Retribution-class assets are authorized for full operational status. Repeat, Spartacus protocol is now active. Around the command center, her officers began moving with practiced efficiency. They had drilled this scenario thousands of times, but never with live weapons and real targets. Chief Engineering Officer Marcus Webb began the power-up sequence for the ship's main systems, while Navigation Officer Sarah Kim started calculating firing solutions for their assigned targets. Time to drop the pretense, Vasquez announced to her crew. Begin Phase 1 conversion. The asteroid mining facility began to change. External camouflage panels retracted, revealing the sleek hull of a warship that had never appeared on any Council database. Fake mining equipment folded away or ejected entirely, replaced by weapons arrays and sensor grids that represented 20 years of human military development in absolute secrecy. The UES Retribution was not a conventional warship. It had been designed specifically to fight enemies with superior technology and overwhelming numbers. Every system prioritized efficiency over elegance, destructive capability over defensive strength. Humanity had learned from its history that victory often went to the side willing to sacrifice everything for a decisive advantage. Main cannon charging, reported Weapons Officer David Chun, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to unleash. Target acquisition locked on Council Station Gamma 7. Vasquez studied the tactical display showing their assigned target. Council Station Gamma 7 was a military installation orbiting a gas giant 43 light-years from Earth. It housed a fleet of 200 Council warships and served as a forward command post for hegemony operations in this sector. In 18 hours, those ships would be heading for Sol System as part of the intervention fleet. The Council's battle plan, obtained through 20 years of careful intelligence gathering, called for a three-pronged assault designed to overwhelm Earth's defenses through sheer numerical superiority. They had no idea that Earth's defenses were not positioned around the homeworld at all. Engineering reports, all systems nominal, Webb announced. Prometheus Lance is ready for firing. The Prometheus Lance was humanity's answer to Council energy shielding technology. While alien forces relied on exotic matter barriers and gravity manipulation for defense, human engineers had developed something entirely different. The Lance used controlled antimatter reactions to create a beam of pure destruction that could penetrate any known shielding system. Each Retribution-class ship carried a single Lance weapon, along with enough antimatter to fire at once. The weapon took 18 months to manufacture and required an entire asteroid's worth of industrial capacity to build. Earth had managed to construct 47 of them in total secrecy. Confirmed target authorization, Vasquez ordered, following protocols that had been established before she was born. Target Gamma 7 confirmed, came the response from Earth Command. You are authorized to engage at optimal firing time. Vasquez looked around her command center at faces that reflected her own mixture of determination and dread. None of them had wanted this war, but all of them had trained for it. Earth's military doctrine was simple. If the Council forced a conflict, humanity would ensure it was the shortest and most decisive war in galactic history. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed her crew. In 6 hours we're going to fire the first shot in a war that will determine whether humanity survives as a free species. Our target contains approximately 50,000 Council personnel. They are not civilians, but they are someone's children, someone's family. She paused, thinking of Ambassador Chin's execution, broadcast live across the galaxy for all to see. The Council chose this path when they murdered our representative. We're not starting this war. We're ending it before it can truly begin. 43 light-years away, Council Station Gamma 7 continued its routine operations in peaceful ignorance. Commander Thekin Al of the Hegemony reviewed deployment orders for the upcoming Sol intervention, confident that humanity's primitive technology posed no real threat to Council forces. The station itself was a masterwork of alien engineering, built from crystalline materials that could withstand the gravitational stress of its gas giant orbit while housing a full battle fleet. Its shields could deflect weapons capable of cracking planets, and its sensor arrays monitored space traffic across a dozen star systems. Those sensors detected nothing unusual in the asteroid field 43 light-years away. The quantum masking technology that concealed the human fleet operated on principles that Council science had not yet discovered. To their instruments, space appeared completely empty in the direction of humanity's hidden weapon. Fleet deployment proceeding on schedule, reported Thekin Al's tactical officer. All vessels will be ready for Sol departure in 16 hours. Excellent, Thekin Al replied, his elongated features showing satisfaction. Signal the other stations that we anticipate minimal resistance. Human technology is at least 2 centuries behind current standards. The assessment was based on careful analysis of human ships and weapons that had been observed during the past 20 years. Council intelligence had identified Earth's military capabilities with precision, cataloging every vessel, every weapon, every defensive installation in the Sol system. Their projections showed that the intervention fleet would achieve total control within 72 hours of arrival. The projections were accurate for the forces they knew about. The Council had no way to account for weapons that didn't exist in their understanding of physics, or fleets that had been built in absolute secrecy, using technologies developed independently of any galactic knowledge base. Humanity's greatest advantage was not their engineering skill or military strategy. It was their experience with deception on a scale that the Council couldn't imagine. Earth had spent centuries perfecting the art of hiding military capabilities from potential enemies. Human history was filled with examples of supposedly inferior forces achieving victory through superior planning and misdirection. The Council had studied human tactical doctrine and found it primitive and predictable. They had failed to understand that everything they observed was intended to be observed, that the real human military had been developing in shadows since first contact. On the U.S. Retribution, Elena Vasquez received final targeting data from Earth Command. The information included not just the location and defenses of her target, but detailed intelligence on Council fleet movements, command protocols, and response patterns. Every aspect of the coming battle had been analyzed and planned for with mechanical precision. Final firing solution confirmed, reported Navigation Officer Kim. Prometheus Lance will impact target in 37 minutes. The Lance required time to travel even at near-light speed. Its antimatter warhead would arrive with the force of a stellar collision, but the distance meant that the Retribution would fire long before the target had any way of detecting the incoming threat. All stations report ready for combat operations, announced Chief Webb. Power reserves at maximum, all systems optimal. Vasquez nodded and opened a ship-wide communication channel. This is the captain speaking. In 35 minutes, we will fire on a Council installation and commit humanity to a path that cannot be undone. Each of you volunteered for this mission knowing what it might require. Each of you swore an oath to defend Earth and all human colonies against any threat. She paused, looking out through the command center's observation ports at the asteroid field that had been their home for 3 years. Soon this place would be empty. The Retribution departed for its next assignment in the campaign that Earth Command had designated as Operation Prometheus. Today the Council discovered that humanity will not submit to tyranny. Tomorrow they will learn that we have spent 20 years preparing for the war they thought they could avoid. We are not conquerors seeking empire. We are defenders protecting our families. We are not the aggressors in this conflict, but we will be its authors. Throughout the ship, crew members took their positions and began final preparations for combat. Engineers verified power flow to the Lance system. Tactical officers confirmed target data and firing sequences. Communication specialists prepared to transmit battlefield intelligence back to Earth Command. Each of them understood that this moment would define humanity's future. Success would mean independence and the right to develop according to their own values. Failure would mean extinction or permanent subjugation under alien authority. Prometheus Lance ready for firing, David Chun announced from the weapons station. Fire, Vasquez ordered. The asteroid that housed the U.S. Retribution shuddered as massive energies discharged through its weaponry. The Prometheus Lance fired with a flash of light that briefly outshone the local star, sending its antimatter payload racing across interstellar space at 99% of light speed. For 37 minutes, the universe held its breath. Then, 43 light-years away, Council Station Gamma 7 and its fleet of 200 warships simply ceased to exist. The lance struck with enough force to vaporize the station's shields, hull, and everything inside it in a microsecond. The gas giant itself was knocked slightly off its orbit by the shockwave. Target destroyed. Came the confirmation from long-range sensors. No survivors detected. Around the galaxy, 36 other Retribution-class ships fired their own lance weapons at targets that represented the core of Council military power. Hidden among asteroids, concealed within nebulae, camouflaged as derelict ships or mining stations, humanity's secret fleet revealed itself with devastating efficiency. The Council's forward bases, supply depots, communication relays, and fleet concentration points were annihilated in a coordinated attack that lasted less than an hour. Centuries of careful military positioning were undone in the time it took for light to cross a star system. On the Council homeworld of Hegemony Prime, emergency alerts flooded into command centers as reports arrived of simultaneous attacks throughout Council space. Fleet Admiral Kethmore stared at tactical displays that showed 37 strategic installations simply vanishing from sensor contact. How is this possible? He demanded of his intelligence staff. We monitored human space constantly. Their entire fleet consists of maybe 200 primitive vessels. His senior analyst, a creature whose multiple eyes allowed it to process complex data at superhuman speeds, flickered through calculations before responding. Admiral, based on the energy signatures detected at the attack sites, each installation was struck by weapons with stellar-level destructive capability. The humans appear to have developed technology beyond our current understanding. That's impossible, Kethmore insisted. We reviewed their technical development regularly. Their most advanced weapons barely qualify as military grade by our standards. Sir, the analyst continued, I'm receiving reports that human installations throughout the galaxy are revealing themselves. Facilities that appeared to be civilian mining operations are transforming into military bases. Cargo ships are deploying weapons arrays. Even their supposedly decommissioned vessels are showing active combat capabilities. Kethmore felt the cold touch of strategic nightmare. Everything the Council knew about human military strength was apparently wrong. Either their intelligence had been completely compromised for decades, or humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history, the development of advanced technology in total secrecy. Recall all fleets to defensive positions, he ordered. Cancel the Sol intervention. We need to reassess the situation completely. Admiral, his communication officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. It's being broadcast to every Council facility simultaneously. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm and professional, speaking in perfect galactic standard with a slight accent that marked it as human in origin. This is Admiral Marcus Torres of Earth Command addressing all Council forces. 37 of your strategic installations have been destroyed as promised. Your intervention fleets are no longer a threat to human worlds. Kethmore's multiple limbs twitched with barely controlled fury. The human was speaking to him as if addressing a defeated enemy rather than the supreme military authority of the galactic government. However, the transmission continued. This demonstration represents only a fraction of Earth's current military capability. We have weapons positioned throughout Council space that you cannot detect and cannot defend against. Your worlds, your fleets, your very civilization exists now at our discretion. The communication channel filled with overlapping voices as Council officials throughout the galaxy attempted to respond. But the human signal overrode all others with technological superiority that shouldn't have been possible. You murdered our ambassador in violation of all civilized law. You declared war on humanity without provocation. We offered you peace, and you chose violence. Now you will live with the consequences of that choice. Admiral Torres paused, and in that silence Kethmore could hear the sound of an empire's confidence crumbling. Humanity hereby withdraws from all Council treaties and agreements. Human space is now closed to Council vessels. Any attempt to enter Sol system or approach human colonies will be met with immediate and total destruction. We want no part of your empire, your politics, or your authority. Leave us alone, and you will be allowed to continue existing. The transmission ended, leaving the Council's Supreme Command Center in stunned silence. For 3,000 years, the hegemony had been the dominant force in galactic civilization. No species had ever challenged their authority successfully. Most had never tried. Now, in the space of 1 hour, a supposedly primitive world had demonstrated the ability to destroy the Council's military infrastructure at will. Worse, they had shown strategic patience and planning that suggested this capability had been developed over decades while maintaining perfect operational security. Analysis, Kethmore demanded. His senior staff exchanged glances that conveyed professional uncertainty mixed with personal fear. Finally, the intelligence chief spoke. Admiral, we underestimated them completely. Everything we knew about human technology appears to have been carefully managed disinformation. Their actual capabilities exceed ours in areas we didn't know were possible to develop. Recommendations? The strategic planning officer, a creature whose entire evolution had been shaped by warfare, made a sound that translated roughly as deep reluctance. Immediate ceasefire and withdrawal from all human-claimed space. Any attempt to continue hostilities will likely result in the total destruction of Council civilization. Kethmore stared at the tactical displays that showed empty space where his forward fleets had been positioned just hours earlier. 3,000 years of galactic dominance had ended in a single afternoon, destroyed by a species that had been systematically underestimated from first contact. On Earth, Admiral Torres closed the communication channel and turned to his staff. Phase 1 of Operation Prometheus was complete. The Council's ability to threaten human worlds had been eliminated, and their leadership was now aware that continued aggression would mean extinction. But Torres knew that fear alone would not be enough to secure lasting peace. The Council had built their empire on the principle that superior force justified absolute authority. Simply demonstrating military capability would not change their fundamental nature. Phase 2 would begin shortly, and, unlike Phase 1, it would not be conducted at a distance through long-range weapons. Phase 2 would bring human forces directly into Council space, where the galaxy would learn what happened when humanity decided that total war was the only path to permanent peace. The US Retribution and her sister ships began moving toward their next targets, leaving behind the empty asteroids that had hidden Earth's secret for 3 years. Soon, the Council would discover that the Lance weapons were just the beginning of humanity's preparations for the war they had hoped to avoid. Earth remembered Sarah Chun. And Earth was just getting started. The Council emergency session convened in absolute chaos. Representatives from 53 species filled the crystal chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the translation matrix struggled to process. Fear, anger, and confusion radiated from every section as species that had never experienced military defeat tried to comprehend their new reality. High Arbiter Velcro stood at the center of the maelstrom, his skin cycling through colors of stress and uncertainty. The body of Ambassador Sarah Chun had been removed from the chamber floor, but her final words seemed to echo in the crystalline walls. Earth remembers its children. Order, Velcro's commanded, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustics. We must respond to this crisis with unity and purpose. Counselor Thrin of the Korth Empire scuttled forward, his segmented carapace reflecting the emergency lighting. Unity? The humans destroyed 37 of our strategic installations in under an hour. They revealed military capabilities that exceed our best estimates by centuries. How do we respond to an enemy we completely failed to understand? They are not our enemy, insisted Counselor Veth of the Merchant Coalition, her crystalline form resonating with harmonic frequencies of concern. The humans consistently sought peaceful relations. We chose to escalate this situation by executing their ambassador. They violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty, countered Admiral Kethmore, speaking from his position in the military section. Our evidence clearly showed weapons development beyond permitted parameters. Evidence that was apparently incomplete, Veth replied sharply. If the humans developed these capabilities in secret, it suggests our monitoring was ineffective from the beginning. How many other species have we misjudged? The question sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. For millennia, the Council had based its authority on superior technology and intelligence gathering. The revelation that a supposedly primitive species had outmaneuvered them completely called into question every assumption about galactic power structures. Velcro's raised his hand for silence. Fleet Admiral Kethmore, provide your assessment of current human military capabilities. Kethmore's form stiffened as he accessed his tactical data. Based on energy signatures detected during their attacks, the humans possess weapons with stellar-level destructive capability. Each installation was eliminated by what appears to be controlled antimatter reactions delivered at near-light speed. The precision and coordination required suggest a command structure we never detected. How many such weapons do they possess? Unknown. Our estimates are meaningless given the complete failure of our intelligence gathering. They could have hundreds or thousands of these weapons positioned throughout the galaxy. A murmur of fear passed through the assembly. The implications were staggering. If humanity possessed the capability to destroy any target in Council space without warning, traditional military doctrine became irrelevant. Furthermore, Kethmore continued, preliminary analysis suggests their stealth technology operates on principles we don't understand. Our sensors detected nothing until the moment their installations revealed themselves. For all we know, human forces could be positioned around every world in Council space. Counselor Drak of the Warrior Caste leaned forward, his multiple arms gesturing aggressively. You speak as if we are defeated. We command fleets numbering in the millions, armies that span 1,000 worlds. Even with their new weapons, the humans are vastly outnumbered. Numbers are irrelevant against weapons that can destroy fleets instantaneously, Kethmore replied. Traditional tactics assume the ability to engage enemy forces and inflict casualties over time. If the humans can eliminate our assets faster than we can deploy them, numerical superiority becomes meaningless. As the Council debated, Earth's Phase 2 operations were already beginning. Unlike the dramatic strikes of Phase 1, Phase 2 was designed to be subtle, psychological, and absolutely devastating to Council morale. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park sat in the command center of the US Shadow, humanity's most advanced stealth vessel. Unlike the Retribution-class ships hidden in asteroids, the Shadow had been built for infiltration and reconnaissance, capable of moving through Council space undetected while gathering intelligence and conducting precision operations. Target acquired, reported her sensor operator. Council courier vessel Harmony of Spheres, carrying diplomatic communications between Hegemony Prime and the outer colonies. Park studied the tactical display showing the alien vessel's course through what the Council considered secure space. The courier was following established shipping lanes, protected by the assumption that no hostile forces could operate this deep in Council territory. That assumption was about to be tested. Begin intercept course, Park ordered. Prepare for boarding operations. The Shadow moved through space like its namesake, visible only as a slight distortion that sensors dismissed as cosmic background radiation. Human stealth technology used quantum field manipulation to bend space-time around the vessel, creating an envelope of altered reality that made detection virtually impossible. The technique required enormous energy expenditure and could only be maintained for limited periods, but it allowed human vessels to operate anywhere in the galaxy without fear of discovery. Earth strategists had identified this capability as essential for the kind of war they expected to fight against numerically superior enemies. Intercept in 30 minutes, reported the navigation officer. Boarding team, standing by. Park nodded and opened a communication channel to her Marine contingent. Major Rodriguez, you're authorized for Phase 2 boarding procedures. Remember, we need their communication codes and strategic data intact. Understood, Commander. My team knows the drill. The drill was something new in galactic warfare. Instead of destroying Council vessels, human forces would board them, extract all intelligence data, plant surveillance devices, and then allow the ships to continue their missions. The crews would remember nothing of the encounter, their memories carefully edited to remove any trace of human involvement. It was psychological warfare designed to make the Council question every aspect of their security. Random vessels would arrive at their destinations carrying human surveillance equipment, their communications compromised, their operational security completely penetrated. Worse, the crews would have no memory of how this had happened. Shadow alongside target vessel, announced the helm officer. Docking tube extended and sealed. Major Carlos Rodriguez led his team of 12 Marines through the boarding tube and into the Council courier. The alien vessel's design was familiar from years of intelligence gathering. Corridors sized for the hegemony's tall frames, crystalline technology that pulsed with internal energy, automated systems that hummed with harmonic frequencies. The courier's crew of 8 was found in their quarters, unconscious from the neural disruptor field that the Shadow had deployed during approach. The weapon was another example of human technological development, proceeding along completely different lines from Council research. While aliens focused on energy weapons and kinetic systems, humans had developed tools that targeted biological and electronic systems directly. Crew secured, Rodriguez reported. Beginning data extraction. His technical specialist, Sergeant Lisa Chun, connected her equipment to the courier's main computer system. The interface required translation protocols that had taken years to develop, but, once connected, human quantum computers could process Council data systems faster than their designers had ever imagined possible. Communications database downloaded, Chun announced. Strategic movement orders, fleet positions, supply schedules. We've got everything. Surveillance packages deployed, added Corporal Mike Thompson. Passive monitoring devices in place and activated. The surveillance equipment was smaller than dust particles, designed to integrate seamlessly with Council technology while transmitting data back to human intelligence networks. Once installed, the devices would provide real-time information on Council communications, troop movements, and strategic planning for years to come. Memory modification complete, reported the team medic. Crew will wake up in 20 minutes with no recollection of our presence. They'll remember a routine malfunction that required system restart. Rodriguez reviewed the operation timeline. Total time aboard the Council vessel, 18 minutes. Intelligence gathered, comprehensive strategic data covering 6 star systems. Compromise risk, 0. Extract complete, he informed Commander Park. Returning to Shadow. The boarding operation was repeated 12 times during the next 6 hours, targeting Council vessels throughout a region spanning dozens of star systems. Each boarding provided additional intelligence while installing surveillance equipment that would monitor Council activities for the foreseeable future. By the time Phase 2 operations concluded, Earth Command possessed real-time access to Council communications networks, strategic planning systems, and fleet movement databases. The enemy's entire military structure had been compromised without a single Council officer realizing they had been boarded. On Hegemony Prime, Admiral Kethmore reviewed reports that made no sense according to any military doctrine he understood. Ships were arriving at their destinations with unexplained technical malfunctions. Communication systems required constant recalibration. Navigation computers reported minor errors that shouldn't have been possible. Individually, each incident could be dismissed as routine equipment failure. Collectively, they suggested systematic infiltration by an enemy that could penetrate Council security without leaving any trace of their presence. Admiral, his intelligence chief reported, were detecting unauthorized access attempts on secure communication channels. The intrusion patterns don't match any known electronic warfare techniques. Source: unknown. The access appears to be coming from within our own networks, but that's impossible. Our security protocols would prevent any external infiltration. Kethmore stared at the data displays that showed his military's communication infrastructure under attack from an enemy that somehow had access to systems that should have been completely isolated from outside interference. Either Council technology was fundamentally compromised, or human capabilities exceeded anything previously thought possible. The truth was worse than either option. Humanity had not simply developed superior weapons. They had built an entirely different approach to warfare. While the Council focused on traditional concepts of fleets and territories, humans had created systems for information warfare, psychological manipulation, and strategic deception that operated according to principles the Council had never encountered. All secure communications are to be suspended immediately, Kethmore ordered. Revert to courier-based intelligence distribution only. Sir, that will cripple our operational coordination. Command response time will increase by hours or even days. Better slow than compromised. The humans have demonstrated the ability to penetrate our most secure systems. Until we understand how, we cannot trust any electronic communication. The order went out across Council space, forcing a reversion to communication methods that hadn't been used in centuries. The empire that had built its power on instantaneous galactic coordination was now reduced to the speed of physical transport, while human forces maintained real-time intelligence superiority through systems the aliens couldn't detect. Phase 2 had achieved its strategic objective. The Council was now fighting blind while human forces possessed comprehensive knowledge of enemy capabilities, positions, and intentions. The psychological impact was equally important. Council leadership was beginning to realize that they faced an enemy unlike any in their historical experience. On Earth, Admiral Torres reviewed the intelligence gathered during Phase 2 operations. The data provided a complete picture of Council military doctrine, technological capabilities, and strategic weaknesses. More importantly, it revealed the psychological state of enemy leadership. They're beginning to understand, he told his senior staff. The Council is realizing that their assumptions about warfare itself may be wrong. They're discovering that superior numbers and technology mean nothing against an enemy that can operate beyond their ability to detect or respond. Recommendations for Phase 3? Asked General Sarah Kim, Earth's chief strategic planner. Torres studied the holographic displays showing Council fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Their enemies had thousands of ships, millions of personnel, resources that dwarfed anything humanity could field in conventional warfare. All of it was irrelevant against an enemy that could strike anywhere without warning while remaining completely invisible to enemy sensors. Begin Phase 3 tomorrow, he decided. Target their command structure directly, not their installations or fleets, their leadership. General Kim nodded grimly. Phase 3 represented the ultimate expression of human military philosophy. When facing a superior enemy, eliminate their ability to command and coordinate. Armies without leadership became crowds. Fleets without coordination became isolated targets. The Council was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology, but their understanding of how civilizations failed under pressure. Earth had studied the collapse of empires throughout galactic history, identifying the critical points where superior forces fell to inferior enemies through strategic brilliance rather than tactical strength. Tomorrow, the galaxy's most powerful empire would begin experiencing the kind of systematic command failure that had destroyed countless civilizations throughout human history. The difference was that this time, the collapse would be carefully orchestrated by an enemy that understood both the mechanics of imperial power and the precise methods required to dismantle it. Council vessels throughout the galaxy continued their routines, their crews unaware that human surveillance equipment was monitoring every communication, tracking every movement, and transmitting detailed intelligence back to Earth Command. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years was now an open book to enemies they couldn't see, couldn't fight, and couldn't understand. Phase 3 would begin the final collapse. And, unlike Phases 1 and 2, it would target not infrastructure or intelligence, but the fundamental psychology that held the Council's civilization together. The hegemony had built their empire on the assumption that superior force guaranteed absolute authority. Humanity was about to demonstrate that assumption's most critical flaw. What happened when the empire discovered that its force was no longer superior to that of enemies it had previously dismissed as primitives? Sarah Chin's execution had been intended as a demonstration of Council power. Instead, it had triggered the systematic destruction of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilization. Earth remembered its children. And Earth's children had learned to fight wars that their enemies couldn't even recognize as warfare until the moment their civilizations began to crumble around them. High Arbiter Velcros had not slept in 48 hours. His skin cycled constantly through stress patterns of deep red and pale silver, while his hands shook with exhaustion as he reviewed reports that grew more disturbing by the hour. The Council's emergency command center buzzed with activity that felt increasingly desperate. Another communication breakdown. High Arbiter reported his chief of staff. Admiral Kethmore's flagship lost contact with Sector Command for 6 hours yesterday. When communications resumed, their strategic databases had been corrupted. Velcros examined the data with growing dread. This was the 14th such incident in 2 days, following a pattern that suggested systematic infiltration rather than random equipment failure. Each breakdown left Council forces temporarily blind and confused, while creating gaps in coordination that would have been impossible to exploit through conventional warfare. Analysis? He demanded. The technical team believes we're experiencing a new form of electronic warfare, his intelligence chief explained. However, our best countermeasures have proven ineffective. The humans appear to be using technology that operates on principles we don't understand. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. For 3,000 years, the hegemony had maintained galactic dominance through technological superiority. The possibility that a primitive species had developed capabilities beyond Council science challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying their civilization. Fleet status report, Velcros ordered. Admiral Kethmore's image appeared on the main communication screen, his features showing the strain of commanding forces under constant invisible attack. High Arbiter, I have grave concerns about our operational security. Random vessels throughout the fleet are experiencing equipment malfunctions that follow patterns suggesting external interference. Elaborate. Navigation systems require constant recalibration, suggesting someone is feeding false data into our positioning networks. Communication arrays develop inexplicable interference that resolves itself without intervention. Most concerning, crew members are reporting memory gaps regarding routine operations. Velcros felt his skin shift to the black of deep fear. Memory gaps suggested neural manipulation technology, something the Council had developed but never deployed due to its implications for civil order. The humans were apparently willing to cross ethical boundaries that civilized species considered inviolate. Recommendations? Immediate withdrawal of all fleets to defensive positions around core worlds. Suspension of all non-essential operations until we can develop effective countermeasures. The request amounted to abandonment of Council authority throughout most of the galaxy. Thousands of member worlds would be left without protection, while humanity demonstrated that the Empire's military forces were helpless against enemies they couldn't detect or engage. Before Velcros could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Emergency alerts flooded in from across Hegemony Prime as defense systems activated without authorization. The planetary shield grid powered up to maximum intensity, atmospheric flight was restricted, and ground-based weapons began tracking phantom targets. What is happening? Velcros demanded. His security chief's crystalline form flickered with patterns of confusion and fear. Sir, our defense network is responding to threat detection protocols, but sensors show no hostile contacts anywhere in the system. Override the automated systems. We're trying, High Arbiter, but the network isn't responding to command authority. It's as if something else is controlling our own defenses. Velcros stared at displays showing his homeworld's military infrastructure operating independently of Council control. Weapons designed to protect Hegemony Prime were now under the command of an invisible enemy that had somehow penetrated the most secure systems in galactic civilization. The implications were terrifying. If humans could control Council defense networks, they could turn the Empire's own weapons against itself. Every fortified world, every military installation, every defensive system throughout Council space was potentially compromised. Cut all network connections, he ordered desperately. Isolate every system from external communication. High Arbiter, his technical officer replied. Isolation protocols are not responding. The intrusion appears to be coming from within our own systems somehow. The truth was both simpler and more sophisticated than Council technicians could imagine. During Phase 2 operations, human infiltration teams had planted quantum surveillance devices throughout Council infrastructure. These devices didn't simply monitor communications. They could actively manipulate any system they accessed. Earth's quantum computers had spent weeks analyzing Council technology, identifying vulnerabilities, and developing exploitation methods. When Phase 3 began, human controllers could access and manipulate Council systems faster than their original operators, creating the appearance of supernatural technological capability. On Earth, Dr. Elizabeth Warren monitored the psychological warfare campaign from a facility buried beneath the Australian outback. Her team of cognitive scientists and military psychologists had designed Phase 3 to target the fundamental assumptions that held Council civilization together. Hegemony Prime Defense Grid is now under our control, reported her technical lead. We can activate or deactivate any system at will. Excellent. Begin random activation sequences. I want their leadership to experience complete unpredictability in their own security systems. The strategy was based on psychological research into civilizational collapse. Empires could survive military defeats and economic hardships, but they could not survive the loss of confidence in their fundamental institutions. When citizens and leaders alike began to doubt that their civilization's basic systems were reliable, social cohesion deteriorated rapidly. Council fleet communications are showing increasing levels of paranoia, reported her intelligence analyst. Command officers are questioning orders, crews are reporting unauthorized personnel aboard their vessels, and there's growing suspicion that their own security forces have been compromised. Warren smiled grimly. The paranoia was entirely justified. Human infiltration had been so thorough that Council forces could no longer trust any aspect of their technology or personnel. Random memory modifications, communication intercepts, and equipment malfunctions had created an environment where nothing could be taken for granted. Initiate the final phase, she ordered. Begin leadership targeting. Across the galaxy, Council commanders and administrators began experiencing targeted psychological warfare designed to exploit their species' specific mental vulnerabilities. Hegemony officers found their personal communications intercepted and broadcast to their subordinates. Fourth Empire administrators discovered that their private data had been distributed to rival factions. Zethkri leaders experienced harmonic interference that disrupted their crystalline thought processes. Each attack was precisely calibrated to create maximum psychological impact while maintaining plausible deniability. Council leaders couldn't prove they were under attack, but they couldn't deny that their most private and secure activities were somehow being monitored and manipulated by an unseen enemy. The cumulative effect was the systematic breakdown of trust within Council leadership. Commanders suspected their officers of disloyalty. Administrators questioned the reliability of their staff. Political leaders began to believe that their own security forces had been compromised. On Hegemony Prime, High Arbiter Velcros discovered that his private communications with other Council leaders had been broadcast throughout the government complex. Conversations where he had expressed doubts about military capabilities and concerns about human technology were now known to every official in the Imperial administration. How? He demanded of his security chief. These communications were transmitted through quantum encrypted channels that exist only within this facility. High Arbiter, we believe the humans have developed quantum manipulation technology that allows them to intercept communications that should be physically impossible to access. They're not breaking our encryption. They're somehow accessing the quantum states used to generate the encryption keys. The explanation was close to accurate. Human quantum computers operated at processing speeds that allowed them to analyze and manipulate quantum encryption faster than Council systems could generate it. From the aliens' perspective, their most secure communications were being read in real time by an enemy with impossible technological capabilities. Admiral Kethmore is requesting immediate audience, the communications officer announced. Velcros authorized the connection, and the fleet admiral's image appeared on screen showing obvious signs of psychological strain. His normally composed features were tight with stress, and his skin showed the modeled patterns of exhaustion and fear. High Arbiter, I'm recommending immediate surrender negotiations with Earth Command. The word struck the command center like a physical blow. Surrender was a concept that hadn't been applied to the hegemony in 3,000 years. The empire that had conquered half the galaxy was being asked to capitulate to a species they had dismissed as primitives just days earlier. Explain your reasoning, Velcros demanded. Sir, we're fighting an enemy that can manipulate our technology, compromise our communications, and control our personnel without our knowledge. Traditional military doctrine is useless against opponents who can turn our own systems against us. Kethmore's image flickered as communication interference created static in the transmission. Furthermore, my staff reports that human infiltration has reached levels where we can no longer trust any information or equipment. We're effectively blind and deaf while fighting an enemy that knows our every movement. What do they want? Velcros asked, though he suspected the answer would be worse than military defeat. Complete Council withdrawal from human space, dissolution of all treaties that granted us authority over human colonies, and formal recognition of Earth's independence from galactic government. The demands represented the total collapse of Council authority over humanity, but that was only the beginning. If the Empire capitulated to human demands, other species would question why they should remain subject to Council authority when primitive humans had achieved complete independence through military superiority. If we agree to their terms, the entire Imperial structure will collapse, Velcros pointed out. Every species in Council space will demand similar independence. If we don't agree, they'll continue this campaign until our entire civilization breaks down, Kethmore replied. High Arbiter, I've studied military history for centuries. This isn't warfare as we understand it. The humans are conducting systematic psychological warfare designed to destroy our ability to function as a coordinated civilization. Velcros reviewed the data streaming in from across Council space. Fleet commanders reporting complete loss of confidence in their equipment. Planetary administrators finding their most secure facilities infiltrated by invisible enemies. Government officials discovering that their private communications were being broadcast to their political rivals. The pattern was clear. Humanity was systematically dismantling the trust and coordination that held galactic civilization together. They weren't conquering Council territory. They were making it impossible for the Council to govern effectively. Request immediate communication with Earth Command, Velcros ordered. The response came within minutes, transmitted simultaneously to every Council facility in the galaxy. Admiral Torres appeared on screens throughout the Empire, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaos he had created. High Arbiter Velcros, Torres began, his voice carrying clearly despite continued interference in Council communications. You executed our ambassador and declared war on humanity. We have responded proportionally. Proportionally? Velcros' skin flashed angry red. You've attacked our installations, compromised our security, and systematically undermined our military capabilities. We destroyed infrastructure that was being prepared for attacks on human worlds, Torres replied calmly. We gathered intelligence on enemy capabilities and intentions. We demonstrated that continued aggression would be futile. The Admiral paused, and, when he continued, his tone carried the weight of absolute conviction. High Arbiter, humanity sought peaceful coexistence with the galactic community. You responded by murdering our representative. We offered trade and cooperation. You chose war. We will agree to cease hostilities, Velcro said quickly. The Council is prepared to negotiate. The time for negotiation ended when Sarah Chun died, Torres interrupted. You had 20 years to treat humanity as equals. Instead, you treated us as subjects to be controlled and manipulated. Now you will experience what it means to face enemies you underestimated. Around the galaxy, human forces began Phase 4 operations. Unlike the previous phases that focused on intelligence gathering and psychological warfare, Phase 4 targeted the Council's ability to maintain basic governmental functions. Transportation networks began experiencing systematic failures as navigation systems received false data. Communication relays developed interference that made coordination between star systems impossible. Economic systems collapsed as financial networks were compromised, and trade routes became unreliable. The empire that had ruled through technological superiority discovered that their technology was no longer under their control. Every system they depended upon for governance, commerce, and military coordination had been compromised by an enemy that understood their weaknesses better than they did themselves. This is the end, Admiral Kethmore told his senior staff as reports flooded in of complete systemic failure throughout Council space. We're not fighting a war. We're experiencing the complete breakdown of our civilization. His intelligence chief, reviewing data that grew more disturbing by the hour, nodded grimly. The humans planned this campaign for decades. Every system we depend upon has been studied, analyzed, and prepared for exploitation. They know our technology better than we do. Recommendations? Immediate unconditional surrender. Full compliance with all human demands. Complete withdrawal from human space, and renunciation of all authority over human colonies. Kethmore stared at the tactical displays that showed his empire's infrastructure collapsing under attack from enemies they couldn't fight, couldn't find, and couldn't understand. 3,000 years of galactic dominance had ended in 4 days of warfare unlike anything in recorded history. Transmit surrender offer to Earth Command, he ordered. The response came immediately. Surrender will be considered after Council leadership experiences the full consequences of their decision to murder our ambassador. You wanted to demonstrate the price of defying galactic authority. We're demonstrating the price of underestimating human determination. The transmission ended, leaving Council leadership to watch their civilization collapse around them, while understanding that humanity was just getting started. Phase 4 was not the final phase of Operation Prometheus. It was the beginning of humanity's real response to Sarah Chin's execution. And Earth's children had only begun to show the galaxy what they had learned about warfare during their long climb from primitives to the species that would remake galactic civilization according to their own principles. 6 months after Sarah Chin's execution, the Galactic Council ceased to exist as a governing body. The empire that had dominated known space for 3 millennia had not fallen to conquest or revolution, but to something far more devastating. The complete loss of its ability to function as a civilization. Admiral Marcus Torres stood on the observation deck of the UES Endeavor, humanity's new flagship, watching Council vessels arrive at the designated surrender coordinates. The ships came not as a defeated fleet, but as refugees from a collapsing empire, their crews desperate to escape the systematic breakdown that had consumed their civilization. Final count, Admiral, reported Captain Elizabeth Santos, his senior aide. 2,400 Council vessels requesting sanctuary. Total personnel, approximately 4 million beings from 37 different species. Torres studied the ragged formation of ships that had once represented the galaxy's most powerful military force. Many showed signs of hasty departure, incomplete loading, minimal supplies, overcrowded life support systems. These were not conquering armies, but survivors fleeing a catastrophe of their own making. Begin processing according to Protocol 7, he ordered. Medical screening, psychological evaluation, and integration planning for those who wish to remain in human space. Protocol 7 was humanity's answer to the refugee crisis they had created through their victory. Unlike the Council's approach to defeated enemies, humans offered rehabilitation rather than punishment, integration rather than exile. Earth's philosophers had long argued that true victory meant creating better enemies rather than simply destroying them. The irony was not lost on Torres. The species that had executed Sarah Chun for defying galactic authority now came begging for protection from the chaos their authoritarian system had created when challenged by superior force and strategy. Admiral, announced the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from High Arbiter Velcros. He's requesting personal audience. Torres considered the request. 6 months ago, Velcros had presided over the murder of Earth's ambassador and authorized the intervention that was meant to crush human independence. Now he was a leader without a government, commanding forces that existed only at human sufferance. Conference Room 3, Torres decided. Standard security protocols. The meeting took place aboard the Endeavor, with Velcros arriving in a simple transport vessel that contrasted sharply with the crystalline magnificence of Council diplomatic ships. The former High Arbiter looked diminished, his once imposing frame showing the effects of months of constant stress. Admiral Torres, Velcros began, his skin showing the pale silver of defeat. I come to request formal terms for the surrender of all remaining Council forces. Torres gestured to a chair designed for hegemony physiology. Please sit. We have much to discuss. The conversation that followed would be recorded as one of the most significant diplomatic exchanges in galactic history. Two leaders, representing civilizations that had chosen radically different paths, attempting to negotiate a future that neither had anticipated. Let me be clear about humanity's position, Torres began. We didn't seek this war. We offered cooperation, trade, and mutual defense. The Council chose to respond with execution and invasion. Now you must live with the consequences of that choice. Velcros' skin flickered through patterns of shame and regret. Admiral, I acknowledge that the Council's actions were precipitous. The execution of Ambassador Chun violated civilized norms. But surely some accommodation can be reached. Accommodation? Torres leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated fury. High Arbiter, your people murdered our representative in front of the entire galaxy. You plan to invade our homeworld and impose military occupation on our colonies. What accommodation exists for genocide? The intervention was meant to be temporary. The intervention was meant to be permanent, Torres interrupted. We captured your planning documents, Velcros. We know exactly what the Council intended. Dissolution of human government, elimination of our military capabilities, and permanent subjugation under alien authority. The former High Arbiter fell silent, confronted with evidence of intentions he could not deny. The Council's plans had indeed called for the complete dismantling of human independence, justified by the supposed need to prevent further weapons development. However, Torres continued, humanity is not interested in ruling the galaxy through fear and intimidation. We're offering something the Council never provided, the opportunity to build a better civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. Torres activated a holographic display showing the current state of former Council space. Instead of the organized imperial structure that had existed 6 months earlier, the galaxy now showed thousands of independent worlds, species that had declared autonomy when their central government collapsed. Behold the legacy of the Council system, Torres said. When your empire fell, every species immediately sought independence rather than working together to maintain galactic civilization. That tells us everything we need to know about how your subjects viewed Council authority. The display highlighted the chaos that had followed the empire's collapse. Trade routes had broken down, communication networks had fragmented, and dozens of regional conflicts had erupted as species settled old grudges without central authority to intervene. What do you propose? Velcros asked. A new galactic organization based on voluntary association rather than imposed authority. The Terran Commonwealth will offer membership to any species that accepts certain fundamental principles, respect for individual sentient rights, prohibition on weapons of mass destruction, and commitment to peaceful resolution of disputes. Torres changed the display to show Earth's proposed structure for galactic government. Instead of the hierarchical council system with the hegemony at the top, the Commonwealth would operate as a federation of equals, with representation based on population and economic contribution rather than military power. Species that choose to remain independent will be respected, as long as they don't threaten their neighbors. Those who join the Commonwealth will receive protection, trade access, and technological sharing. Most importantly, no species will be required to submit to the authority of another. Velcros studied the proposed structure with growing amazement. The humans were offering to replace the empire they had destroyed with something genuinely better. A governmental system that addressed the fundamental flaws that had made the Council vulnerable to the kind of warfare humanity had conducted. Why, he asked. You have demonstrated the capability to rule through force. Why offer partnership to those who sought to destroy you? Torres smiled, and, for the first time in months, the expression carried genuine warmth rather than grim determination. Because, High Arbiter, we learned from human history that empires built on fear always fall eventually. We prefer to build something that lasts. The Admiral stood and walked to the observation windows showing the assembled Council refugees. Every being out there made choices that led to this moment. Many supported the decision to execute our ambassador. Others simply followed orders from superiors they trusted. But all of them are here because they recognized that their civilization had failed them. He turned back to Velcros. We're offering them the chance to build something better. Not as subjects or conquered enemies, but as partners in creating a galactic civilization based on principles that actually work. And if species refuse to join your Commonwealth, then they remain independent, as long as they respect the independence of others. Humanity didn't fight this war to build an empire, Velcros. We fought it to ensure that no empire could threaten our freedom again. Torres paused, looking directly into the alien's eyes. The Council ruled through technological superiority and military dominance. When you encountered a species with superior capabilities, your entire system collapsed because it was based on unsustainable assumptions about power. The Commonwealth will be built on the principle that every species has something valuable to contribute, and that cooperation produces better outcomes than domination. If we're wrong, then our system will fall just as yours did. But at least it will fall honestly, rather than through the kind of deception and oppression that characterized Council rule. Velcros processed this information with growing understanding. The humans had not simply defeated the Council militarily. They had analyzed its fundamental weaknesses and designed a replacement system that addressed every critical failure point. This was warfare conducted at a level of strategic sophistication that his species had never imagined possible. What of those who cannot accept your principles? He asked. They will be monitored to ensure they don't threaten others. If they choose warfare, they will discover that humanity's military capabilities extend far beyond what we demonstrated against the Council. We've had 20 years to prepare for threats we couldn't see coming. We used 6 months to dismantle an empire. We can spend 6 days eliminating any species that threatens galactic peace. The threat was delivered without anger or hatred, simply as a statement of fact. Velcros realized that he was speaking to representatives of a species that had planned for every contingency, including the possibility that some civilizations would prefer extinction to cooperation. I will convey your offer to the surviving Council leadership, he said. Many will find it difficult to accept partnership with those they attempted to subjugate. That's their choice, Torres replied. But they should understand that the alternative is not a return to the old system. The Council is gone, Velcros. It will never return. The question now is whether former Council species will help build something better, or whether they will waste their time trying to restore a system that has proven itself fundamentally flawed. The negotiations continued for 3 days, working out the practical details of transitioning from imperial collapse to federal reconstruction. Millions of beings needed transportation, food, medical care, and eventual resettlement. Entire species required new governmental structures and economic systems. Humanity approached these challenges with the same systematic efficiency they had applied to warfare. Refugee processing centers were established throughout former Council space. Medical ships provided care to beings whose home worlds had lost basic infrastructure. Engineering teams began rebuilding communication networks according to principles that prevented any single species from controlling galactic information flow. Most importantly, humans began the careful work of identifying and nurturing species that showed potential for democratic self-governance. The Commonwealth would not repeat the Council's mistake of imposing authority from above. Instead, it would grow through voluntary association of species that shared common values and mutual interests. 6 months later, the Terran Commonwealth held its first General Assembly on a neutral world designated as the new galactic capital. Representatives from 43 species gathered to draft the founding documents that would govern their association. Admiral Torres, now serving as Earth's senior diplomat, watched the proceedings with satisfaction mixed with caution. The species assembled here had all experienced the collapse of imperial authority and chosen cooperation over continued conflict. But building lasting peace required more than good intentions. The Fourth Empire delegation wishes to propose Amendment 17, announced the Assembly moderator. Recognition of traditional hunting territories for species with historical territorial claims. The proposal sparked immediate debate, as representatives struggled with the balance between species rights and individual freedoms. These discussions would have been impossible under Council rule, where the hegemony simply imposed decisions on everyone else. The Zefkri Collective supports the amendment, with modification to include protection for nomadic species that don't maintain fixed territories, came the response from the crystalline delegates.